I'm going to just real quick ask everybody who feels that they're going to speak today to please consider joining in the introduction portion where you can introduce yourself and maybe whatever project you are most pumped about, that you're working with, volunteering with, or that just use it as a space where you can plug something that you feel that you believe in the BitShares ecosystem. I'm doing this because we're trying to, not that we're trying to get rid of Bytemaster, of course, but it's important that we start debuting and showing all the things that are going on in the BitShares ecosystem below the surface. And I know all of us try to be kind of private to a degree, but this is a good way, if you want to volunteer, this information, to say who you are on the forums and any projects that you're working with. So with that said, my name's Fuzzy. Welcome everybody to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is Friday, April 8th, 2016. We're joined by the BitShares community and maybe some people from Bitcoin Talk will speak up at some point in time today, but we'll know a little bit more about that later. Like I said, my name is Fuzzy. I am one of the volunteers for Beyond Bitcoin, and I also am working with something called sharebits.io behind the scenes. So with that said, Bytemaster, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself and then maybe move into any updates on your side, and then we can move into the community's portion?
Hello, this is Bytemaster. I'm the founder of BitShares and Steam.
Does anybody else have any Thomas, Once Upon a Time? You guys speak quite often. Data Security Node. Chris.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Bahai, known as Data Security Node. We're heading up the initiative called Blockchain Bunker.
My name is Tom.
Once Upon a Time, do you have anything?
Okay, my name is Once Upon a Time, or you can call me Once. I helped fund the development of the stealth asset, and I'm awaiting further development of that before I report to the community on that. I'm also working with Ken Code, or at least I'm very interested in his wallet and his point of sale system, so I'm going to be downloading his point of sale system as soon as it's ready and demonstrating it to merchants in my area, and then I'm going to be demonstrating it to a centralized exchange that I hope will then adopt some of our smart coins and BitShares.
Sounds like a lot going on, man. Thomas, do you have anything to say? I feel like we may have cut you off there.
I was just going to add that I'm one of the delegates of the 23, 28, or however many there are at this moment, and glad to be here.
My name is Brindle Swan. I'm working on Schmidt Coin, which will be something similar to Solomon Solars and Cents when more consumer-friendly features are added or subtracted from BitShares. I also hope to work with Ken Code on the point-of-sale systems.
Hey guys, my name is Solomon Nadakali. I'm the founder of the New Money Project, and we're here to, bring the mainstream coin to mainstream people. We're currently working with and other developers from the project, and we're preparing to run a very, very, very awesome Kickstarter. So we're just really happy right now with the outpouring of support that we're getting from the community, and we're proving a lot of the notions and premises that we had in terms of how marketing can really help a coin really progress in terms of adoption and getting the word out there.
Awesome. Does anybody else have an introduction they would like to give?
I'm Roadscape. I'm a witness and worker for BitShares.
Is CryptoFresh something you work on by chance?
Yes, it is.
Cool. Well, I would definitely recommend people check that out too. Anyone else, or should we start into the update portion?
All right, so I'll go ahead and start with the updates. There was a new GUI released with numerous fixes about 2 days ago. If you haven't updated your wallet in a while, you should check it out. SVK and the team have been doing a lot of work to fix bugs and enhance things. There is a release of a separate downloadable Stealth wallet, and the Stealth asset has been distributed to Once Upon a Time and his partners. So I believe he will be selling that on the market to anyone who wants to get a piece of that. There's been a lot of discussion this week of whether or not that feature should be bought out by the blockchain. That's a move I support, but of course, it would require about 3 weeks of full inflation to do so. So that's a little hard to get voter approval for, but we should certainly consider it. I guess if there are any questions at this point in time, I'm open to those.
Well, I've got a question. Johnny Bitcoin was also the other person who mentioned that they think it should be a blockchain feature, and I agree. And so I offered to sell the whole amount to him at break even, and then he can set up the worker and wait for the funds and charge a 10% gain or something like that. But I need funds now. I want to add liquidity to some markets for this point of sale venture, and so I don't want to wait around for weeks or months for it to get voted in as a worker proposal.
So how's that going to work Once Upon a Time?
Well, I've had some inquiries from investors who will who will buy the whole share amount all at once, and if that doesn't happen, then I will possibly. I'm still thinking it over in my mind. I will possibly put it up for sale on the DEX within the next few days. We'll see.
So what I guess the question that I'm asking and I'm thinking the most, and I don't know what you guys are thinking, but in the past, worker proposals have been kind of hard to get. So, and that's kind of why you paid out of pocket in the first place to make sure that this feature was built, right? So with that said, what happens if the worker proposal doesn't get voted in, you know?
That's what I was just saying. Was my mic off or something?
No, you said that about the worker proposal. I'm just thinking to myself, you know, how would that work out? Like, is there a backup plan?
I need funds in the short term, so the only person I know who also said that they want to have it returned as a feature of the blockchain, and who has the money to buy it out, didn't want to. He didn't want to take the risk. So, and I don't want to wait around for months to get funding, which I need almost immediately to provide liquidity in some markets. So if some other venture capitalist wants to make me an offer on the full amount, and I have had one inquiry so far, then I'll consider it. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to have to put it on the DEX in the short term, possibly within the next few days.
Gotcha.
Right, so we're not saying that we're going to force BitShares to do anything. It's just that this is a discussion that some people suggested, and I think it would simplify things a lot if the blockchain took over the asset and took responsibility for that. That'll help simplify a lot of messages. People don't have to understand, well, why does this person or this group of people profit when I use stealth? It just simplifies things a lot. But the voting patterns have clearly given the anti-dilution crowd a lot more power than, they've been picking up power over time. So I wouldn't expect that to get voted in.
Real quick, are there any proxies here who plan on voting for something like this if it's put up?
I don't think it's going to be a worker proposal based on what Once Upon a Time just said, because he can't wait around for that kind of approval to take place. Bytemaster, I had a question regarding this, in that you have said.
Well, Thomas,
before...
hold on one second.
Sure.
Because I was actually speaking to this with respect to Johnny Bitcoin or whoever else was interested in potentially buying the asset and then doing a worker proposal like that. I'm trying to gauge if there are any proxies who are who would vote in approval with that. So any of the 500 plus people who listen to this would know, hey, I can seek out this proxy so we can actually start converging on some of these issues and actually working together to make it happen. You know what I mean?
I think that we have to reach out to negotiate this stuff with the proxies behind the scene, and then bring it to the community. Because
good call.
That's a lot of back and forth discussion of whether or not it's worthwhile, and we don't need to spend everyone's time talking about it if these people have veto power. So we should contact Alt and a few others that are in the anti-dilution camp and talk about it. Should be, I guess that's all I'd like to say about stealth right now. So
before we move off from stealth, Bytemaster, you've mentioned that one of the reasons that we've had some difficulty with this in terms of getting it out to the public is the reliance on backup. You wanted to make that more solid than it is right now, and there was a thread that was discussing this about using the blockchain as the backup medium. Is that something that you'd considered in your approach to providing a backup service?
Yes, it is. The challenge with putting backups on something public like the blockchain is the security of your wallet now depends only on your password. Passwords are very easy to brute force, which means if you put your wallet file in public, even if it's encrypted, they can brute force decrypt it. And at the end of the day, unless your password is as good as your private key, your wallet will be compromised. People will target particular wallets based upon how much money they have in there. So if there's a big wallet with a lot of money, people will spend a lot of computational power mining the password. That's
another good question. A good thing here is to ask you would be, because Riverhead brought up that a proper password, and this is something that's important for everybody, right? I mean, this is a foundational issue for security. Riverhead a while back told me that if you have a phrase of like 3 or 4 words or 4 or 5 words and a special character somewhere in there and includes spaces, kind of like a little sentence that you can remember well and visualize well, that is extremely difficult. It takes like 320 plus years or something, as opposed to like 8 years for and I'm not perfect on this as far as the amount of bits and the password, but he's saying the number of characters, but it was for like 8 characters or something like that, and then I even went up to 16, and he said it's still better to do a passphrase that you will remember that will have that many words in it. I mean, can you say if that's correct or incorrect from what your knowledge is of this stuff?
Here's what I know. I know that every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin blockchain cracks a password with 68 bits of entropy. Now that's a lot of hash power, a lot of specialized hardware applied for that particular task. But 68 bits of entropy is a lot. It's certainly within the realm of possibility, and that's every 10 minutes. If you give days or months to the attacker, the amount of computational power required to crack that falls dramatically from what Bitcoin's using. So that's an example of a real-world brute force search for passwords, and how far you could actually get. So if you're going to pick a password that's based upon words in a dictionary, and you have a dictionary of 64,000 words, 64,000 words is 16 bits. You pick 3 of them, you're at 48 bits. That is pretty good.
Well, but nevertheless, I mean, we're relying on the passphrase to unlock anybody's wallet is relying on a brain key or cryptography, and it seems to me that same level of cryptography could be used to encrypting a wallet. Now, you have raised a good point here about how much time an attacker has to focus on one particular thing to crack it, because that does reduce the issue. I mean, it does make it easier for the attacker, but still, it seems like there ought to be a way to encrypt something. I mean, we're relying on encryption here for the whole purpose of the blockchain. You would think that we ought to be able to do this.
Encryption is only as secure as the bits of entropy in the password. Now, normal websites, they rate limit how fast someone can try passwords, right? So unless the server's compromised, you can't brute force someone's password. But anytime a server is compromised, passwords are routinely brute forced. You can look up whole databases of common passwords from compromised servers where people brute forced the discovery of password from the salted hash of the password. At the end of the day, a private key is just a really long password that you can prove you own with some math without having to reveal a password to someone. When you encrypt a wallet file, it's a password that if you have the information, it allows you to decrypt it. Now, you don't share that with anyone else, so you don't have to prove it to anyone, but that's all it is. So if you want to have the same level of security as the private keys give you, you need 32 bytes, which is 256 bits of entropy. If you're going to do that with words from a 64,000 word dictionary, you need 16 words long in your password to equal the same security that you get from a private key. Now, let me tell you my thoughts on how wallets and hosted wallets should actually be managed going into the future. There are systems out there designed to manage passwords, things like LastPass. LastPass can, with a system like that, you have to remember one password, one master password. They provide all the server backups and security. Their entire business is dedicated to protecting vaults of passwords. You might as well consider that to protecting vaults of private keys. So we can remove the need for the wallet to store private keys if people just log in with something like LastPass and you make the password to the wallet a private key, and let a third-party tool manage it. There's that. So someone asked, what if the password entry was a transaction? For a transaction to be validated, everyone needs to be able to do it, which means the attacker could attempt and validate the transaction without even sending it to the blockchain. You'd have to do some kind of secure multi-party computation over the blockchain to derive the password. At the end of the day, all that is multi-sig. So proposed transactions with weak passwords is slightly better than, because you have the combined of multiple parties' passwords. But that's the concept.
Someone asks a good question about two-factor authentication. Could you cover that at some point here too?
Yeah, two-factor authentication requires an authenticator and the person being authenticated. Public key, private key cryptography is anyone can authenticate it. But with two-factor, you need a person or a server that knows how to communicate, and it involves three parties or three systems: the server, your cell phone, and your email address. Blockchains can't send text messages and verify that. They all depend upon secrets. The authenticator, who's sending you a message to your cell phone, they know the code that you sent your cell phone. If that secret was out there publicly, like on a blockchain, it doesn't work. So you can use two-factor authentication with a server or a service provider, but you can't use it with a blockchain other than multi-sig. Multi-sig is how you do multi-factor authentication on a blockchain. Each factor has a private key that is used to sign off on the transaction.
Thus why you're bringing up these different services, like what was it called? LastPass?
LastPass, yeah. There's probably others. I would love any feedback or review from the community on what the best ones are. LastPass stores it on a server. There's other services that keep it all locally. Even your browser's password manager is probably a better place to store your private keys than the systems we put in place. So the downside is, particularly with stealth, we don't just have one key we're trying to store. We have a bunch of keys and a lot of data. Now, we can store all that data on the browser locally and then use the password to decrypt it. But that doesn't solve the problem of being able to log in anywhere and have access to your data. Now, we spent a lot of time working on a server-side solution for storing this data. And I can say that it works. It's not a question of it working or not working. We can store it on the server and recover it. The problem is, if something happens to our server, everyone's wallets that were backed up there could disappear, and that's a liability issue, which means we need to have more than just the code technically works. We need to have backup servers, automatic replication, a whole host of infrastructure that needs to be deployed by services like OpenLedger. And that requires teams of specialized people to do that. And that is something that it's not just a one-time develop it and you're done. It's an ongoing maintenance cost, ongoing support costs to provide that kind of service. And without that type of service We are concerned that people who receive stealth transfers forget to back up their wallet after they receive a stealth transfer and then lose their money. Because it's not like Bitcoin where you can cache a bunch of receive addresses. Every time you do a stealth transfer, there's a new key. You need to keep the receipt. If you lose the receipt, then you lose the money. So in the post on the forum, I presented an alternative approach to all this. That's a compromise between ease of use and privacy. And that is to only do blinded amounts. Do not try to obscure who's transacting with who. In this mode, you'd be able to tell that some well-known whale transferred some unknown amount to an exchange. So you can speculate, did they transfer $1 or $1 million to the exchange? You don't know. You just know that they sent something to the exchange. This is going to be all kinds of speculation about, how much money they have left in their account and so on and so forth. But it would be more privacy than we have today. No one would be able to tell anyone else's balance. It could be enabled by default. And perhaps most excitingly is you could use the rate limited free transactions with it, because the accounts involved. Those accounts can have some amount of public balance associated with it that allows them to transact periodically for free. And that would allow more adoption. This is one of those things where stealth is only stealth if everyone's using it. If you're the only person using stealth, then it's trivial to trace it through the stealth path. Because it started out public, it went stealth, and then at some point goes from stealth back into public in some other account. If it doesn't do a lot of mixing around in the stealth phase, your privacy is lost. So the challenge with privacy is to do it right requires a lot of effort. You need to make sure that you communicate out of band. You can't just broadcast this on the blockchain. It either forces everyone to scan every transaction, and if it really is stealth, the receiver has no idea you broadcast anything to them, because no one should have any idea of who sent money to whom. So it's this out-of-band communication of the receipt, as well as out-of-band communication of the account public keys, addresses, that make the entire process more complicated than what we've come to expect with transferring from named account to named account. So that is the ease of use issue. Is not just one of implementation changing our GUI. It's a matter of the steps, the information exchanges that need to occur, and that automation of those steps could compromise users' privacy. There's a middle ground. There's another option, and that is to use a centralized server to do private messaging and to have the wallet automatically send the receipts to the person. That server would know everyone's balance, or at the very least, it'd know who was transacting with whom, but no one else would. And in that mode, you could make it easier to use, so on and so forth. So, as you can see, we implemented in the GUI the most secure, most private mode. And that might have been a mistake. It might have been better to err on ease of use, because we tried to make it so private that no one uses it. Sometimes easy use actually improves security and privacy, even though it's technically less secure than something that would be harder to use.
Just because the user can actually use it.
Yes. It's sort of like if you make your password so long that you can't remember it, so you put it on a sticky note on your computer.
Then you kind of, yeah, there's no point.
Yes. So, there's a lot of lessons learned there, but we did build the interface and deliver the code that we said we would build. It was probably poorly spec'd in terms of building what the market needs rather than building what is technically secure.
So where does that leave us as far as, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Roadscape.
I don't know. I still think that wallet backups on the blockchain would work because, say, even if they are stored on a really secure, highly backed up server, I mean, you have to assume that somebody could get in anyway. So all of the wallets have to be encrypted on OpenLedger or whichever server. And originally I thought, why not just make it, store them publicly? Because if they're encrypted with, say, their own brain key, that's going to be really hard to brute force. And you could store a hash of the user's email in, say, a custom operation along with the encrypted wallet so that you can kind of quickly locate your backup through your email. And then as long as you have the brain key saved, you can restore your wallet file with all the extra keys you've imported and all of your stealth addresses and whatnot. Wouldn't that work?
Well, I think we should certainly consider options for storing it there, and we can try to make it as secure as possible and warn users if they pick a password that's easy to brute force, and allow the market to punish users who don't heed the warning.
It should definitely force them to use like a generated brain key, just like the wallet generates one now and tells users to write it down and save it. Because if we're putting wallets if we're storing wallets publicly, I don't think users should have a choice to use their own password unless it meets some crazy requirements.
Also keep in mind that with something like stealth, the wallets can get huge for anyone doing a lot of transactions. So the blockchain's got a maximum transaction size, a maximum block size, which means that you'd have to design your wallet to be updated incrementally, right? Add key to wallet, and then you'd have to reconstruct your wallet by pulling in all the pieces to your wallet from the blockchain.
How big does a stealth wallet get, and can it be compressed?
Wallets contain private keys, which is random data, which isn't really compressible. The size depends only on the number of transactions. So if you're an exchange, you can get gargantuan.
Well, then I like Xerox's idea of putting them all on GitHub.
Could a chain that's created specifically for this use case work? I mean, then you would have people who would actually invest in that chain and because they would know that they could drive value into it.
There's lots of options for how to store this. The bigger question that we should be asking is, who makes money by doing work to add these features? How do they make money? And how do they sustain it? Because if you use GitHub, great. GitHub's free to a point. If you start having a GitHub repository that takes gigabytes of data, it's not necessarily going to be free anymore.
Well, this could also be important for non-stealth wallets too, because we still need an easy solution for somebody to, have a wallet associated with an email maybe, and be able to recover it if they forget to save it or.
Sure. And we've actually looked at, using Dropbox and other storage mechanisms to do your backup. So there's lots of options here. The goal is to make it as easy to use as a centralized exchange. And if you force the user to tie it to their link accounts, that's no longer as easy to use as a centralized exchange.
LuckyBit is bringing up storage, which is spelled STORJ for those who are not familiar with the cryptocurrency. But Bytemaster, you spoke with him a while back. I don't know if you remember or if there's much changed from their model, but from what you do know of it, do you think that LuckyBit's question here regarding why not interface with StoreJ might have some substance?
StoreJ, I believe, charges people. It's a way of selling your unused space. So in order to store stuff on it, you might have to charge. Now, I could be wrong on that. A lot of these services are all about micropayments for selling resources. And if they're not about that, then you've got civil attacks and resource abuse. Right? If I can upload unlimited amount of data to StoreJ or MadeSafe, then I can abuse the system. Now, I haven't studied these systems in closer detail, but it is my opinion that we need to move toward systems that eliminate fees. It doesn't matter how cheap the fee is. The fact if someone has to say, "Oh, should I back up my wallet? It's going to cost me 1 cent." Well, all right, now they've got to get 1 cent of some other coin in order to do it. And that's a whole new logistics issue. We have a blockchain. We have the ability to store it. If we were going to store it on a blockchain, I'd store it on the BitShares blockchain. You could do distributed hash tables and so on. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, well, let's just make it simple. Use confidential transactions with blinded balance and public identification of who's talking to whom, and you're good to go. Then you can use a single password for your wallet. That's basically like having one key in your active authority, which is what 99.99% of all accounts do. So that would be the most natural way for people to use it. Otherwise, you're just introducing layers, right? You need one password to get your wallet, and then once you have your wallet, you need another password to unlock it. And what do you unlock? You unlock a private key, which is just another form of a password. All those layers add complexity, unless each layer reduces the number of bits you need to keep track of. So if you go from super secure to password to PIN, that makes sense. But if the top level is a brain key that has to be as secure as the lowest level, then the intermediary steps are almost pointless.
They're actually a barrier.
Yes, it creates a barrier to users.
So, this is what floats around in my head, and this is partially because of this week's news and all the stuff going on. But a sidechain that focuses specifically on something like this seems like where the model has already, it shows us in Bitcoin that this is kind of the route to take, and that side chains could grow speculatively as kind of altcoins of their own in their own merit, right? And if they are based on graphene, then they have all of the inherent flexibility and efficiencies that graphene blockchains get that other altcoins wouldn't. So, what would be keeping somebody from creating a graphene alt chain that does specifically this function for us and charges money for it? Or would it be better to do a fee-backed asset? Or are those things not possible?
You missed the point. Charging fees for saving passwords. No one's going to do it. LastPass is free, and they provide plugins for all the major browsers. They give you free source. Now they have a paid version that you can upgrade to, but if you look at their business model, they're managing passwords, which is universal, and they're not making a lot of money. So if you try to shrink it down to, I'm going to start a business that just manages passwords for a blockchain, you shrink it down so that your potential customer base is so small, it's not a viable business. Whether you charge micropayments or subscription, it just doesn't make sense. So
you don't think that there's a real opportunity for a competitive business model against something or like LastPass that would be blockchain based?
It's possible, but once again, the blockchains as a whole have relied on currencies to prevent spam, which means users need to acquire currency, which means you have an onboarding issue.
It makes it, but there might be an incentive for everybody to use BitUSD equivalents on various chains, right?
To assume payment for service was trivially easy. There's still a cognitive cost, and there's things certain people expect certain things. If you want mass adoption, it needs to be as easy to log into as any website and as free as any website. You shouldn't be charged for changing your password.
LuckyBit brings up a good point, though. He says here, I think premium members should get extra security features.
Sure. I'd like to focus this back on how do we solve the problem of what should really be going on here is companies like OpenLedger or MakerX or any other BitShares wallet provider. That's their business model to solve these things. I would say that the blockchain doesn't care how users' passwords and keys are stored. That's a wallet provider's detail. You don't see the Bitcoin Foundation discussing how blockchain.info manages the private key storage, or how Electrum stores their keys, or how I guess where there's Multibit and Armory. There's all these different wallets. They all go to different lengths and use different techniques to secure users' keys. There's two-factor authentication providers, right? So if you really want to make this secure, what you do is you set up an account with someone like OpenLedger. OpenLedger would implement two-factor authentication. It automatically co-signs your transactions with you. If you forget your password or your private key, they can use the two-factor authentication to change your key. And at the end of the day, the user experience is like a centralized website. So the answer here is to talk to Ronnie, to talk to anyone else running a service like OpenLedger. Those services are the ones that maintain the servers. We've provided the raw technological ability to store it on a server, but I'm not OpenLedger. I don't have to maintain the servers. I don't even have login permission on the servers. That security is that business's concern. So when it comes to rolling out something like Stealth, if you're going to do the super stealth version that we had, then you need a service provider that is going to support it, or users need to take personal responsibility of making a backup of their wallet, saving it to a flash disk, and putting it in a safe after every time they receive a transaction.
So I guess what I take away from this is the discussion of whether a blockchain is always needed. And in this case, it really isn't.
A blockchain is nice because it gives you massive replication. But it's not so nice in that there's costs associated with the massive replication.
Makes sense. Learning experiences for me here. We learn, well, I know at least I learned from a lot of your experiences, and I'm sure you've learned from these experiences yourself. LuckyBit says OpenLedger should contact storage and form a relationship. I'll reach out to him for him.
Yeah, if it was my business, I wouldn't go with storage. I'd probably go with IPFS.
IPFS?
Interplanetary File System.
I'm not familiar with IP. Wow. Are you from... Okay, I obviously didn't read up on this interplanetary file system. Just the name catches you, baby. Well, real quick, I wanted to ask real quick, does anybody have questions that Bytemaster has not covered? Anything that you feel is important? We're looking at about 15 minutes to go here.
At first, I thought the Steam thread was an April Fool's joke, and so I really don't understand or get what Steam is.
I've been asked not to comment on Steam in great detail until we actually have the full website and white paper and all the other information that we plan on publishing out. But information that's already out there that you can glean from the discussion forums is it's a blockchain-based social media platform.
Can you talk at all about what you spoke about in the thread?
Sure. I'll say that Steam's something that a lot of people associated with BitShares are working on. It's built as its own blockchain because it does things that cannot be done on BitShares. And it cannot be done on BitShares for numerous reasons, most notably the inflationary policies or anti-inflationary policies and the restrictions there. And secondly, the fee structure of BitShares is not compatible with the desires. So I'll say that the Steam platform does not have user-issued assets. It does not have bit assets or the smart coins that BitShares has. It doesn't have proposed transactions, withdrawal permissions, or a lot of the other fancy things that BitShares does. It's designed to focus on one application area and go with that.
Is there synergy between Steam and BitShares, or is Steam standalone in what it's trying to accomplish?
I believe it's going to be a killer asset to have listed on the BitShares exchange first. So it'll drive a lot of people to learn about BitShares just so they can trade Steam.
Can I ask I wanted to know, BM, what's the demographic you guys are aiming Steam at?
Now, that type of question is not something I can discuss at this point in time.
It's a good question, though.
What about share dropping on the BitShares community?
As my recent blog post pointed out, share dropping or pre-allocating any tokens whatsoever has a certain amount of regulatory uncertainty associated with it. So the regulations clearly state that mining or using computational resources to generate coins or tokens is considered use and not administrator or other things. So therefore, you're guaranteed not to have to register. Share dropping is similar to pre-mining. It would be like Ripple, and Ripple was fined $700,000 for selling their pre-mined XRP. So I hate mining in general, but the Steam blockchain is 100% issued by mining. So at the end of the month, about 30 days from launch, it switches over to a variation of DPoS using the tokens that have been mined. 90% of all Steam is held in long-term vesting balances, and only vesting balances can vote. So there's a lot of things going on there. I'd say at this point, the Steam blockchain is in somewhat stealth mode. The real release of Steam is going to be a future event where we're going to have all the information, website, white paper, and other pieces available at one time.
If anybody wants to mine it, you have a post up on Bitcoin Talk for Steam, correct?
Yes, Steam was announced in Bitcoin Talks altcoin announcement thread, where all the other altcoins announce.
How big is? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Bytemaster.
No, all right, go ahead.
How big is the Steam team and the people that know the information that you're not able to disclose right now? How many people are on the team that know that information?
Probably about a dozen.
That's a pretty decent little team. It's good to know that the people who've been working with you guys for so long have gotten an opportunity to expand and continue working in this space.
I'd say that the information is all there in the code, and that's been released from day one. The forum has, people have dissected the code and identified a lot of the features associated with Steam. There's information out there about it, but so participate in those forums, ask questions there, and there's people that'll figure it out. It's not going to be long until we get the rest of the information out there, but yeah, there is an information advantage, and it's actually was done intentionally that way. So,
well, there's an information advantage for a lot of people in this space. I mean, I've seen many coins that do well that have had those information advantages.
That's what pump and dump is all about, is information advantage, because they know what the intention is in terms of getting the marketing out there, and then that's really what a dump is all about, is advantage to know what's coming next.
Yeah, and Tom, I used to be so against that, and then at the same time, I find myself thinking, look at all these pump and dump crews and all of the volume they've brought to exchanges.
Well, the difficulty with it
when it really
is
comes
the ethics.
down to it,
When you're doing a pump and dump for the purpose of just getting money for yourself, somebody's going to lose in that proposition. I don't think that's what's going on with Steam, so I'm not going to label it that way. But point is that the people that do this have this malicious intent. That's not good for society. It's not good for anybody. But if you're building something that society will benefit from, like Steam or anything else, then maybe that's just the best way that you have to fund it, to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and of course the ethics are definitely frustrating, but especially for an idealist.
Well,
but
there's not really a challenge here with ethics. Everything in the entire free market is all about information advantage. The only way you can actually make a profit in the market is by having and using information known to you through sources, your entire life experience, combining that to make a decision to buy or sell based upon where you think things are going to go or what you think is going to have value. Information is, if everyone had the same information and the same ability to reason on that information, everyone would make the same trades at the same time, right? So information advantage is essential to profit. Second thing is, if you look at my blog post on the subject, the goal was, it asked the question, how do you launch a new cryptocurrency project while complying with the regulations and raising money? And you have to use a lot of the things we've talked about here, no contractual obligations, and so on and so forth. There's no regulations against buying a cryptocurrency when you know it's undervalued and selling it after some announcement that you know is going to pump it. There's no regulations against buying a cryptocurrency and then putting a lot of effort into building a company that's going to make that cryptocurrency more valuable. Both of those things generate profits for the person who bought the currency when it was undervalued and then sold it after they brought a lot of value to the currency. So that's what a lot of the big whales in Bitcoin did. They came in, they bought a lot of Bitcoin when it was cheap, then they invested in businesses to get regulations and on and off ramps and things like that. And now Bitcoin's a lot more valuable and they made a profit. It's easy to do when it's small. It's harder to do once it gets big because you need to buy even more, spend a lot more money to buy in. And then you've got to do a lot more work to dramatically increase the price. But when it starts out small, it's a lot easier. So rather than doing a IPO or a crowd sale, you mine it, you buy it cheap, and then you sell it after the price goes up. The profits from the sale are the property of the person who built the system. Now there's two options they have, is they could take the profits and walk away, or they can reinvest the profits that they received into growing their business and building the platform with the hope of generating even more profits. So what we've done with Steem is complied with all regulations, make sure that we have a token that's mined, created by computational power with equal opportunity, with full information. The source code is full information that anyone trained in the art can figure out exactly what the rules are, what's going to happen, and eventually the implications thereof. So there's full information available. The only information people don't have is what our business plans are, what our investment strategy is, what information, how we plan to build infrastructure around the blockchain. But that's no different than any other altcoin. So we've created a system that complies with the regulations, that doesn't actually do a crowd sale, but functionally generates similar results in the sense that we generate profits that can be used to fund development.
Real quick, do you mind if I toss in a question? I mean, I have to ask this question. LuckyBit says, Bytemaster, is it possible for an anonymous invisible issuer to do a launch, regulated or not, if they can't be found? And then Xerox says Satoshi did it that way. And LuckyBit says, like Satoshi, technology today makes it much easier to do that. Do you see it as something that would be possible to be an anonymous issuer of one of these tokens?
No, it's not really possible. At the end of the day, well, I suppose if you implemented something like this confidential stealth transfers and did lots of mixing, but in order to get cash in your bank account, you have to go through KYC at regulated exchanges. You might be able to pull a Satoshi and be rich on paper, but Satoshi can't touch a single coin without tying them all together. There's been analysis that have pretty much identified all the coins that belong to him. And if he moves even one of them and sells it through an exchange, all of his coins are compromised. So.
Wow.
I'm wondering if a user
I was
issued
unaware of
asset.
this.
I'm wondering if a user issued asset that you intend to link to Steem's value, but isn't legally, would be something that could be share dropped.
Well, with the Steem network, it's too late to even discuss share drops. And I'm not actually.
Well, there will be a brownie situation, a brownie thing, right?
It's my own business to take care of the people who have got me where I am. So I will take some of my profits from this and buy back some brownies at some point. But I'm not going to say how much, and it's certainly not binding. Brownies are just a way of saying thank you to people and keeping track of those who have put in a lot of effort and haven't been recognized. And that's what Steem is really designed to do, is to recognize everyone who puts in effort.
Bytemaster, in your opinion, will Steam have a long-term downward, upward, or neutral effect on the coin on the market cap of BitShares?
I think it's going to be neutral. It's completely different markets. The value of BitShares is mostly tied to its potential as a decentralized exchange. So whatever the people who get involved with Steam are not the same people who would get involved with BitShares. It's two completely different demographics.
But are people going to dump BitShares to buy Steam?
Well, in the same sense that people dump BitShares to buy Ethereum, people move their money to whatever people think is going to go up in the short term.
Will there be a Windows executable to allow mining?
I'm sure at some point there will be.
The call for witnesses for Steam, is this something that requires a mining background or a mining hardware to participate in, or is this the DPoS thing that's down the road?
It's mostly DPoS.
Thanks for that.
95% of all blocks on Steam are produced by elected individuals. Well, sorry, 90% are produced by elected witnesses like BitShares.
But no.
Right now, it's all done by proof of work.
Well, does anybody have any more questions or comments? This is looking around 5 minutes over, and I know that we could go over this indefinitely. And I also know that I'm personally very happy for any graphene chain that ever exists, whether it's a quote unquote competitor to BitShares or not. I love the fact that graphene gives the flexibility and the potential to even, enable self-governance of a chain. I mean, these things to me are amazing. And if I go on CoinMarketCap one day and I see a bunch of graphene chains littering the dang place, I'm going to smile. So I see this as a step in the direction of growing the entire ecosystem, not just BitShares, but BitShares is going to be one of the primary places where all of them trade. So thank you everyone for attending. Please, I'm going to start posting these announcements earlier in the week, both to Bitcoin Talk and BitShares Talk. Please go to those announcements and, tell people, bump them, tell people to join us, because we're now at the point where we can start saying, hey, we have a decentralized exchange. We can bring you guys on board and your tokens on board, and we can do hangouts with you, with the entire community, and people can see all that you offer and all that you've all worked for. And this is how we start bringing people and other communities in, by seeing what we've accomplished together and seeing that we want them to talk about what they've done. So thank you, Bytemaster. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to take about a 10-minute break for everybody before Solomon talks about what he's doing. Oh yeah, does anybody have a recording without me being choppy? Does the nuclear bunker data?
No, because you are the source of the choppiness.
Yeah, I think it's my internet. And oddly, it's around this time.
So if you record it, you would be the only one with the working version.
No, it isn't just this time, Fuzzy, because when you were playing the music earlier, it was choppy from the very beginning.
No, I mean like this time of day.
That's my point. This hour of the day, we're several hours removed from when you started doing that broadcast this morning, and it was choppy way back then.
Really?
Yes.
Maybe you messed up something with the.
Has it been terrible?
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing.
Well, damn. I'm glad that you're candid.
I'll catch you all later.
Yeah.
It was great talking with you. Look forward to next mumble.
Definitely.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bytemaster.
Thank you.
Peace, Bytemaster.
Have a nice weekend.
Well, I'm going to
One trick I
See
use
about-
is if you log in with your phone and just set it to listen and put a headset on the phone and then talk to the PC, you can hear what other people are hearing.
I wonder if I turn down the audio per packet.
It might actually be that you have your latency trimmed too short, like you don't have enough buffering going on. So I would look at the configuration of the mumble. It has too many fancy switches, but any one of those switches could cause the record buffer to cut off. It has nothing to do with your network connection, but everything to do with how your computer is configured to take audio off of your sound card and into memory.
But
I would suspect that you're probably right, Bytemaster, and that I probably shouldn't argue with that, and I'll check it out right now.
did you change any of that stuff then?
No, I haven't, but I've noticed something weird about Mumble. Occasionally my settings will just change. Like one day I logged in and my mic wasn't working, and it was working the night prior.
That's Windows for me. Windows does that to me as well. It randomly decides what it wants to do that day, or that was a restart.
Windows does have its
Yeah, it's
anomalies.
ridiculous.
Especially sound. Windows and sound is a very odd. With all the new devices, just about everything now has its own audio device. The video cards, the monitors, everything has an inbuilt audio card now. And Windows seems to have a hard time resolving all that.
Oh, good old Windows. Well, it
Actually,
sounds a
they
lot better.
changed a lot with, I don't know when, Windows 7 or something.
What'd
They
you say?
actually in Windows they removed the support for hardware audio, and they made their own sound server thing. So no matter what kind of audio device you buy, so maybe that's why. Well, you have this big audio company that built all these fancy 3D audio sound cards, and now it doesn't matter anymore with the new Windows. It's not supported anyway. Creative
Interesting.
sounds. So you can have the most fancy audio card you want, but Windows just runs its own sound server on top of it.
Hey guys, I got to get on a call real soon. I'm expecting to get on a call real soon, but I wasn't able to say it during the mumble because we kind of flew into other topic. In regards to Once Upon and Stealth and the sale of the assets, there's been talk about bringing it back to BitShares. I was talking about this actually yesterday with Crypto Prometheus, and while we were going back and forth, he actually made a really good point that we already have a mechanism for introducing Stealth back into BitShares. All that has to happen is the committee needs to create a worker proposal. And then what they can do is that if that worker proposal then gets the votes to buy back the shares, then all those shares are going to go back to the committee, and then it's just going to become another fee structure that the committee that already has to operate along with the rest of BitShares. So there's already a mechanism for it to come back to BitShares if the committee proceeds to create a worker proposal and everybody votes to have those shares bought back.
That's a great idea.
What do you think the chances of that being approved are, John? What? I'm asking the question good enough.
0. I don't think it's going to get voted.
Yeah,
You know what?
That's my
this
take
is the
as
thing
well.
that I say. I say I agree with you guys, but screw it. Let's try our damnedest. Maybe we'll surprise ourselves.
I don't know. I really don't think so, because the anti-dilution crowd is against all development, and I think the stealth is really kind of a niche market within our whole ecosystem for many people. So I don't see it as getting the approval that we're going to need.
Man, that's just, I mean, that's like the owners of a business voting to not take out a loan to build onto something that's necessary.
I hear you, but you're speaking to the choir in that regard.
It makes perfect sense from their point of view. They get to squeeze the developers in the West, make them work for free.
I've been looking into the differences in the communist or Chinese culture, whatever you want, because China has an older tradition, kind of similar to this, with the empire structure that they had before. So they seem to have a completely different outlook on things as we do. One of the scariest articles I read was by this the BTC China guy. What's his name? I forgot his name. He did an article in an interview, and he talked about how these Chinese living in a communist nation have very different outlooks on even stuff like having choices or changes. That's culturally frowned upon in China, to have choice or have a vote. People don't like it. That's kind of scary if you think it from our perspective.
Well, that's the question is, I find myself wondering about this, and I might be wrong, but it seems dangerous that we wouldn't get funding for all this stuff, and it seems that we have to find alternatives, but those alternatives seem somewhat sparse you know. I mean, Crypto Prometheus comes up with a great idea. We can't do it. Damn. No problem, Adrian. Well, everybody, are you ready to listen and participate in another hangout?
Only if you fix your sound.
Is my sound still bad? It sounds good on my end now.
There's some choppiness in it. I think
sounds...
Bytemaster is correct as to what the cause is. I don't think it's internet. It's the choppiness is too high frequency. It happens. It's not typical of an internet bandwidth issue.
No, it's not intermittent. It's constant. It has a constant rhythm as well.
Okay, hold on a second here. Testing.
That's a lot better.
You guys hear me?
No, that's back.
I don't think it was ever gone. I think you have to give it a little bit more stream, more time to really gauge it.
Yeah, you have two settings. You have the bandwidth, or you have the number of data that's put in each package, and then you have the timing between packages. Those are the two settings you can set in Mumble. And what Bytemaster was saying is that you set the timing too small, so there's not enough room to fit all the data in a 10 whatever nanoseconds or second. I think nanoseconds.
You're saying audio per packet is too small?
It's either you set the delay too low, so too small a time frame for it to send, or you set with a too high bandwidth stuff. So either you lower your bandwidth or you increase your delay. Mumble, by the way, should warn you of that. It should, in my client, it shows a warning if you try to mess it up. But yeah, like I said, one of the things you can do to test it is connect your phone, listen in on your phone, and then talk in the mic, and then you can hear if it's a problem. You should be hearing the same as we would be.
Well, what I did here is I went into the settings. I turned down the quality, turned up the audio per packet. There's nothing else there in the audio input section, even under advanced.
Are you used to something in between the mic and mumble? So have you some kind of what you call that jack system, or I don't know what's the Windows version of it, where you can plug in multiple audio devices in a software suite.
Oh, you're talking an interface?
Well, yeah, everything is an interface, but are you using that? Maybe that's causing the issue.
Testing, 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 testing. Does it sound like it's cutting?
It sounded pretty good, actually.
Yeah, this sounds a lot better.
Blah, 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 blah.
It's still there intermittently, but a lot less than it used to be. I don't know what you changed. It isn't.
I'm turning down the mic.
Oh, you're clipping.
Yeah, you're clipping. That's what it is. Not a typical
Testing,
way
testing,
that clipping
testing.
sounds.
I think
Dirty
it's
south, dirty south.
I think it may be the interface cutting off. If you're clipping it, instead of distorting, it just cuts off the sound. Maybe that's what's happening.
It might be doing that. Now, as I'm talking here, it doesn't sound like it's cutting out as much to me.
No, it is.
It might.
It is.
No, it still is, yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I actually am now listening through my cell phone here.
It almost sounds like you're constantly hitting the mute button. So it's also interrupting. It makes it hard to follow what you're saying because we're missing vowels or consonants.
Yeah, it's literally cutting my words in half.
Yeah. And
I don't experience it that dramatically here, but maybe
if
with
you're
his game fast fingers, he's doing something that we're not even aware of here.
The thing is, if you're not a native speaker, it's harder to follow English than if you're a native speaker. You're more